And so as we open this up and we think about the legacy and just celebrating and honoring what Dr. King meant for this country, my question to you is, what is your dream? Dr. King had a dream. We all know that dream. But what is your dream? Like, what dream do you have? And I ask people this a lot when I travel the country. I said, what's your dream around all these things that we're doing around DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion? And you know what everyone says? Everyone kind of lands at the same place, that we will eventually get to a place where we can find what we have in common, that we won't be looked at based on what body we're in, but that people really begin to see and really get to the heart. And so I kind of went too quick. I got anxious. I wanted to tell you this little part right here because this is a good story. So, you know, during the pandemic, we couldn't go to many places, so I decided to write. So this is my third book. It's called Heart. And some of the stuff you'll see in the presentation, but I go in more depth. It's designed to be a workbook, something that you can do at the job, you can do with your family to really help people understand why DEI is important. But this is my attempt to make it really simple, because sometimes you have these thick books and it's just like, I don't want to read all that. So I wanted to make it very simple. And I didn't know what to call it, what to call my company, what to brand it. And then finally, I was thinking, I was like, you know what? What makes this work so difficult is that we got to touch people's heart. So that's why I decided to name it Heart. And so when I first designed it, it was a red heart. I thought it was really neat. I thought it was cool. And then my son, this son number 3, he was like, nah, Dad, that's not cool. He said, how about you take 2 fingerprints from 2 different people from 2 different cultural backgrounds and they form heart? So I said, you're smart, man. So if you guys buy a book, he said, I owe him $2 for every time I sell a book, because he said that's his IP, you know. So, you know, this is Dr. King's dream, that, you know, that we will live in a nation where we won't be judged by the color of our skin, but by who we are, right? But, you know, I want to give you this slide right here to really make sense of what DEI is and what B is. So diversity is a reality. That's always present. We're always going to see that. But equity is a decision that we make. It's a choice. Inclusion is an act of love. This is our behavior. And B, the belonging is the result. So another way to frame it is to put it like this. Maybe you've seen it before, maybe you haven't. But you know, in math, if you take away any of those, you will not get the B. So if we pursue diversity, but we don't act in love, we're not inclusive, you're not going to get the B. You could do the D and the I, but if you remove the E, y'all know where I'm going, right? You're not going to get the B. So all these things are important. Another way to frame this is a very popular book called The Giving Tree, but I think it really captures what this work is about in pictures. So if you look at this picture, you can see that obviously the tree is in balance, it's leaning in one direction, and one child does not have to put forth a lot of effort. And so what this means is that for some of us, we're born on where we're on the left side of the tree. For some of us, we're on the right side of the tree, right? And so what I want you to think about is I want you to think about the psychological impact on both children. That when things are always given to you, you don't have to work for it. And think about the child on the right. When you're reaching, you're like, what about me? You got that question mark. Like, when is something going to work out for me, right? And so what's so funny is that whenever I show this to kids, they be like, why don't the kid on the right side go on the left side? I'm like, baby, I wish it was that easy, but it's not, you know. But I asked them, you know, what do we do? And so oftentimes in our world, what we do in organizations, we attempt to move and lead with equality, but this is an example where equality doesn't work. And so when we give both children the same thing, we still have a gap. Now, what is interesting, I don't know if you caught this, in the previous slide, the gap was 1 apple. But when we move to equality, the gap has become much larger. And so we've seen that, you know, even during the pandemic, some people were able to get the house remodeled. Some people were able to do all these different things and save and invest. And some people were trying to figure out where the next meal came from. And so equity is where we want to go. And so one of the ways that we will try to fix a situation when it's going to take a long time to fix the tree, we lead with equity, right? And so this is where we get equity, where we give the child on the right a much taller ladder so that they can at least eat, so they can have an opportunity to be able to get that apple. The challenge in our country is that people oftentimes lack empathy. And by empathy, I'm speaking about putting yourself in someone else's shoes to feel what they feel and to see how they see it. And so as a result, we have people arguing saying, hey, that's not fair. My child got a 6-foot ladder. Your child got an 8-foot ladder. Hey, the one on the right would gladly switch with the one on the left, right? And so this is why it's important to have fearless dialogue and inclusive conversation, or I like to refer humble conversation, so that we can begin to have a exchange of ideas and perspectives so that we know how we can begin to be supportive of each other. Now, this still doesn't quite fix this thing. And so in order for us to really move further as a country, as an organization, as a community, we have to begin to really look to achieve justice. And justice is where you see that tree, and both children can have equal sized ladders. Now, when I look at that picture, for me, it looks like a lot of work. And this is important because I think sometimes we give people the assignment of, you're part of the DEI team. You're part of this. In order for that tree to change, it has to be, everyone has to be a part of making that possible. And when I was working at St. Edward consulting and doing this work, I had to let them know, because I'm an African American, I can't fix this by myself. Like, we all have to be a part of being thoughtful, being change agents in order to make this school, to make our company the right kind of environment where everyone feels like they win. And they feel like they're heard, they're valued, they're supported, etc. Now, let me show you this slide. I want you to look at this. I want you to try to see what's off, what's wrong. So this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We kind of changed it a little bit to make it Maslow's hierarchy of inequity. And so what's interesting when we look at this, Maslow's framework is suggesting that if you don't have those basic things in place, it is going to be much difficult for you to climb up that pyramid and experience things like connection, love and belonging, being able to think about, like, what makes me happy. That is a privilege to be able to say, am I happy with what I'm doing? Everyone can't do that. They like, I got to work. I got to do this so I can take care of my fundamental needs. And so to be able to say, you know, am I happy doing this? I'm going to quit. I'm just going to do this. That, it takes having a lot of things in place, right? And so when I work with schools and educators, I like to show this graphic because what it does is it shows us that, going back to the tree, depending upon if we're on the left side or the right side, it shows us that we don't all start from the same place. So if you look at the family on the left, they're a little bit more excited. There's no hesitancy compared to the family on the right, where there's this hesitancy when I come. So what that means is that when people come to a company, they get hired, or they go into a community, for some people, depending upon their lived experience, depending upon how their identity might have been under attack, they're hesitant. They're not sure if this is going to be safe for them. And so what I found at the high school, when we collected data, for those students who were people of color, for them to feel the sense of love and belonging, it took them 3.4 years. Well, high school, you're supposed to get out of it in 4. So that means that they weren't taking advantage of all the programs, amenities, things that we offer. So go back to the apple tree. The apples don't really represent apples as much as it represents opportunities, right? And so what we have to do with the DEI work that we're all called to is we got to try to level this out. And I knew from firsthand experience, because when I started working there, I was the only black person, the only person of color. And we were drawing many different families from across the Northeast Ohio area that wanted their son to go to the school because of the opportunities. And it never failed. When we do our open house, you show all the bells and whistles and you do all that nice stuff. the families of color will always come and say, hey, Dr. Knight, what's it really like there? I'm like, they pay me now, right? What you want me to say? You put me in a tough situation, right? But I said, no, my sons go here. The school is really humble and they're really trying to get better. But the reason why they did that, it doesn't even mean that the school was bad. It doesn't mean that the school was doing anything. This is the result of trauma. This is the result of living in a world where maybe your identity has been under attack. You've experienced discrimination. And so you're not sure when you go into this environment, what does that mean for you? And so that impacts people's safety. If people are not safe, your brain is going to do weird stuff. And you're not going to be able to reach your fullest potential. So let me try to give you this story on belonging, because I always love to try to make this stuff as simple as possible. Because sometimes when you talk to people, sometimes people get defensive. Sometimes they may not always get it. And so I like to tell this story. So here's the story. So it goes like this. So we have this dad. Let's say he went to St. Edward, and back in the day, he was like the man, right? He was the all-American football player. He got the full scholarship to go to Ohio State, played for the Browns for a few years before he got injured, and now he's working at one of the, big companies. I won't say Progressive, right? But he's working at one of the, the big companies in the Cleveland area. And now this dad has two sons. The oldest son is following the dad's footsteps. He is incredibly talented, gifted. He is going to be an All-American. He is getting scholarship offers from all over the country, and he can't wait to say yes to Ohio State. The dad is taking him all over the country to these camps. Anyone here and a parent know what I'm talking about. Like, Dad, Mom, I got to go to this camp. I got to get better, and so forth. And so the dad is spending all this money, and he's so excited. This dad is the father of the athletic club. When there's a game, he takes off work half a day so that he can get all the stuff organized before the game, right? Now the dad has a second son. The second son tried football but doesn't like it. But he's incredibly artistic, and he's a phenomenal pianist. And the second son is always like, Dad, you going to make one of my recitals? And the dad like, I work. I'm going to try. Then finally he gets the courage to say, well, Dad, I got this incredible competition in New York where I get to compete. And the dad's like, we can't afford it. Right? And now the mom is on Dad. You got to make that game. You make the game for son number one. You got to make that recital for son number two. I know. I'm going to get it. I'm going to get there. And so what makes this story interesting is because we all can relate to it, right? Because we all, if you have more than one child, maybe you don't have five, but you're trying to balance it, and you're trying to be there for every kid, right? And you know that when you have more than one kid, some kids like to do things that you don't like, right? You also got to deal with that, right? And so when we think about what belonging feels like, if you were to ask the dad, do you love both children? The dad would be like, of course. He'll be offended that you asked that, right? But if you were to ask son number two, do you feel supported and do you feel loved? Son number two might not be able to say it with the same amount of passion and strength as son number one. And then you have to begin to think about what would the relationship be like between son number one and son number two. Might not be the best relationship. And so now you got to begin to think about son number two, when things are happening that he's excited about, he probably goes and tells mom, but he doesn't go and tell dad. And so what happens in organizations when we don't achieve belonging, some people just keep their good stuff to themselves. And because that's safe. Because people don't want to go experience rejection or disappointment because you don't share the same passion, right? Let's take it a little bit further. Because, a lot of parents got Twitter and Instagram, social media. They go on vacation. Look at my family and all that stuff. Well, what do you think if we were to go to Dad's office and we were to look at the pictures, or we were to go to Dad's Facebook or Instagram? Do you think you would see an equal amount of pictures? Or you might see a lot of football? All right, I think y'all got my point. Okay. So, what that means is that humility is needed. The reason why it's difficult to move this conversation forward is because people struggle with listening. Because I ask people all the time, like, think of somebody in your life that you know really embodies humility. Now, sometimes people struggle with defining humility, and sometimes we have this idea of humility that's not consistent with what humility is. Humility doesn't mean weakness. Humility doesn't mean that you're a pushover. Humility just means that you have a low self-focus and you're more other-minded. That the ego you're not driven, it's all about your ego, right? That's all that means. You can be confident, you can be extremely good at what you do and be humble. What we know from research, from humility, is that people who are humble are good listeners. They're collaborative, right? That's what we need in our work environment. That's what we need in our world. What the dad needed is he needed to listen to his wife so that he could make the adjustments, right? He needed to have some humility. And oftentimes what makes it difficult in our world is that people struggle with really listening. So humility is very key. Now, when we talk about this, what's interesting is that there's some great research where they ask young people, they ask millennials, they ask these different generations, what are some top qualities that you most look for in leaders? And these are the top 3 qualities. Number 1 was humility. Number 2 was ethics. And number 3 was strategy. That's what young people look for in leaders that they admire and people that they want to follow. You didn't hear me list anything of how good you look, how smart you are. 2 of the 3 top characteristics deal with what kind of person you are. That's where we are in our world today. Is people are looking for people who have integrity, people who have heart, and people who care. This is so important because what it does is it helps us to overcome our fears. Let's go back to the Maslow hierarchy, right? So this is kind of Maslow's hierarchy over to the left. And what you see over here, this is what people need. People want to know that they're comfortable, they feel safe, that they're accepted. At the top, that they could be themselves. But what leaders have to do, and what I argue is what humble leaders do, they look to figure out how can we do what you see on that pyramid. How can we meet people's needs? How can we be clear about making sure our communication is good, that people know what to expect, that people are invited to connect, and that people feel heard and they feel included, okay? Because there are these fears that we all have. And these are the 5 types of fear based on research. So those of you that are in the studio, you got the benefit of getting this wheel, which you see on your screen, right? And at the center of this wheel is trust. Now, I was looking at some research. The research says that 21% last year, when they poll all these companies, 21% trust the leadership of their company across this country. That's the number. That number is too low. Because when people don't trust, it's going to be difficult to be able to build an environment of belonging. And what you see around this wheel is what's really key in order to drive belonging in any organization.